right, hey, good morning. Hey, before we get started today, I just want to, on behalf of my family, say thank you for the celebration that you shared with us last week. We have been overwhelmed by your words of encouragement and your acts of kindness, not only this past week, but through the entire 20 years of being here in Olympia. You have loved us in our weaknesses, and you've encouraged us in our strengths, and you have just been family. When Rob sent us kind of a document, a questionnaire of just kind of asking us to fill it out to kind of get to know us, he said one of those questions was, what is your favorite memory over the past 20 years? And as Debbie and I were talking, we could not think of a program, we couldn't think of an event. What we thought was people, the relationships, the friendships that we've built. And so thank you so much for that, for these relationships, for what you've shown to us. We are just eternally grateful. So thank you so much. Thank you. I don't think it's any surprise that God has us talking about the love of the church today. And so we're just going to kind of go into that. I read a paper by a psychologist who was kind of thinking about the sociology of TV. And why do we watch certain shows that we do? Why are certain shows more popular than others? And I think if we were to think through that and try to wonder why, we would have a list of reasons why we like this show better than other shows. And so this psychologist went in and started interviewing people, started collecting data, started doing all the research. And what she found, or the conclusion that she came from, was that some shows stand out, or the shows that stand out are not necessarily because of the acting or because of the funny storylines, although that doesn't help or hurt, right? Having good actors and having funny storylines. But the thing that sets these sitcoms or these shows apart from everything else is a sense of community. That they can portray this sense of community that in our culture we tend to long for, that we tend to desire. And so we gravitate to shows that we look at to say, we kind of want that. As funny as they are, as real and as transparent that they are, is that we said we want these relationships, these genuine, authentic relationships, to show us that we belong to something, that there are friends, that we have people that we can do life with. Our culture, again, we tend to be, live kind of in a lonely culture. And so over the last 20, 30 years is that we have been intentional about trying to create atmospheres to give us a sense of community. We see this throughout our culture, throughout our society. We see our young adults wanting to go and to live in urban centers, in the downtown areas of our city, because that's where the people are. That's where the events and the parties tend to happen. We find ourselves, moving onto social media to engage with more people, to build followers, to have more friends, to be able to be connected. We find houses in kind of high-density neighborhoods with community parks because we want our kids to play with other kids. We want the picture of what a community should look like. We rearrange our homes and our office spaces to be more open so that we see people, that we can talk to people more easily. So we tear down the cubicles. We open up our spaces to be able to do those things. We even have people who will use public transportation just to try to get around more people. There's a term that our culture calls this, and it's called crowded loneliness. It's this crowded loneliness, the sense is that you are surrounded by people, but still feel like you are disconnected or lack meaningful relationships. See, even though we've done all of these things, our culture is probably more lonely. The statistics show us our culture is more lonely now than it's ever been before, that we live in a state of crowded loneliness. So Paul is going to talk about in our story today is that even though that we see this crowded loneliness everywhere else in our culture, in our communities, in our workplaces, in our transportation, in all of these places, it should not be this way in the church. That we should be a people that know each other, that belong to each other, that has authentic relationships where we can be ourselves and feel the love and kindness of the church. See, Paul says this, that if you want to walk in the Spirit, and if you want to obey the law of God, which we know is to love your neighbor as yourself, then we need to love each other. We need to work together. See, as we walk in the Spirit, it should transform our relationships. So if you have your Bibles, I would love for you to turn to Galatians chapter 6 as we look at our story today. If you don't have a Bible, please grab a black Bible in front of you. You can turn to page 975. That's where you'll find our passage. And you're welcome to take that one home as our gift to you if you don't have one. And as you're turning there, what we're going to see is Paul is saying that there are three specific ways that we can love one another. We can love each other by gently restoring one another, by carrying each other's burdens, and then sowing a harvest of holiness. Those are going to be kind of our 3 points today. So let's take a look at how we can gently restore one another, and we're going to read verse 1. It says, "Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted." So Paul starts this verse, and he uses kind of an interesting word. He says, brothers. But we know through this passage is that Paul is a Jew and the Galatians are Gentiles, so they are not biologically related. But Paul is trying to convey through this word that those who have been adopted by God and are part of the household of faith are family. And therefore, we should treat everyone who has been a part of that household as family. See, in the same way that we would care and love our biological family is that we should care and love the church. Matter of fact, is that Jesus will say is that you should care and love the church family even more than your biological family. And so we should look after each other. We should know each other and to be able to see that we are family. You know, it's easy when we come into the church and we see people in a messy situation to try to look the other way. We start to see the situation and we say, wow, that's too big for me. They need professional help. So I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to attempt to come in and to help them. And so we go to that way. They need a professional. Who am I to help in this situation? We think this, I have my own problems, right? Like, I have my own stuff that I got to deal with. How can I help them with theirs? Or maybe we think this really isn't my business. And so we tend to kind of look the other way. We think, you know what? You do your thing, I'll do my thing, and we'll just live independently together as this church. But a healthy family will lean into each other even when it's hard. See, a family that loves each other doesn't ignore the situation, but runs to the situation even when there's a cost to it. And so Paul is saying is that we should love each other so much, that we should be such a family that we should seek the spiritual welfare of each other by helping to restore each other from sin. The word restore means to put back in order or to repair to its former condition. This is the same word that fishermen would use to mending their nets. Right? If you go out fishing, like the net would start to fray or all that, you'd have to mend it. You'd have to restore it. Or a doctor would use this word to having to kind of reset like a dislocated bone. Now, I've never had one of those, but I hear it hurts, right? Having a dislocated bone hurts because the bone is not in its intended natural design position. So a doctor has to come in and set it. He has to maybe inflict some pain, although healing pain, to get the bone where it needs to be. And so Paul is saying, listen, church, we need to come to people and maybe even inflict a little pain, but healing pain to help them restore them from sin, to help them heal their heart. Now, Paul doesn't want us to be the spiritual police where we're running around and saying, you have sin and you have sin, I got you, and we're all having conversations. He doesn't want that. The word caught means is that what it means is that a pattern of sinful behavior. See, this is something that a person has done over and over again and can't seem to find their way out of without some help. Maybe it's someone who's caught in addiction, and they need someone to come alongside of them. Maybe we see a parent who is working so much that they're starting to neglect their family. Maybe we see, some family members who've decided to reprioritize their life, and so they're forsaking the assembly of the church together. They're not prioritizing, their corporate worship. Maybe we see someone who is, their gaze is lingering a little bit too long, or they're having these flirtatious acts with someone other than their spouse. And we need to come in. We need to help them. We need to restore them. We need to tell them, hey, you're missing the mark. You're dislocated in the body, and I want to gently restore you, bring you back to a place that God has designed for you to be. Now, Paul says that there is a right way and a wrong way to kind of have these type of conversations. But he doesn't give us kind of a list of steps as kind of like Jesus does in Matthew 18 of how we are to kind of restore someone. But Paul tends to speak to the heart of the restorer. See, Paul believes that how we approach someone will have a great impact upon how someone receives the message. That if we approach someone in the wrong way, they probably won't receive it well. But if we approach someone in a loving way, they may receive it a little bit better. See, he knows that when we come in a wrong heart, we tend to come for all the wrong reasons. We can come in our pride. And in our pride is that when we see someone who is fallen, who is caught in sin, is that we start to compare them to us. And we start to realize, we start to feel a little bit good about ourselves, and we start to say, well, you're caught in this sin. I would never be caught in this sin, right? We immediately start to have that type of mindset. Or maybe is that we come in and we try to promote our self-worth, to build our name for ourselves. Well, the elders asked me to talk to you about this. I'm the guy, all right, we're having this conversation again. Hey, I had to help Jared over here again. And so we tend to have that. We kind of cascade that conversation. When we come for all the wrong reasons, is that we tend to speak a little bit judgmental to others. We have a condemning spirit as we talk. We become like the Pharisee that Jesus talks about who prays, God, thank you that I'm not like this sinner. And let's face it, when we come with the wrong heart and we come for the wrong reasons, the person can perceive that. We've all felt a little bit of those type of conversations. And instead of being restored, the person tends to kind of dig in. They tend to maybe harden their heart a little bit. They realize that you're not coming for me. You're actually coming for you, and I want nothing to do with what you have to say. So I'm going to go and do my own thing. If we come in the wrong heart, we can tend to make the matter worse. Paul even says is that when we come in our pride, we can fall victim to the same sin. When we come, again, in the wrong heart, we can think that we are above this sin, that we don't have to worry about this sin. And Paul says, as soon as you drop your guard, as soon as the walls come down, Satan goes for you. And the next thing you know, that you are caught in the same sin or a similar sin just like it. And now you're unable to help the person who needs to be restored, because you need to be restored as well. So he goes on and he says, listen, you need to come in a spirit of gentleness. Now, last week we saw that gentleness is a fruit of the Spirit. And so therefore, Paul is saying is that those who are walking in the Spirit should be the ones who restore. Those who are trying to live by the Spirit should be the ones that should be looking and should be willing to have these conversations. But he goes even farther, is that if you are walking by the Spirit, is that you should desire to have these conversations, that you should not be okay with sin, that you shouldn't be looking at someone's situation and say, I hope someone else deals with that because I see it. He's saying that the Holy Spirit should convict us to say we have to help, because they need help, and God is working already in my life, and so I'm going to help them. See, we come to teach in a spirit of truth and love. When we speak with just truth, we are, again, judgmental, condemning. When we just try to speak in love, our cultural definition of love, we tend to just gloss over. Everything will be okay. Do you, and eventually you'll figure it out. But when we come speaking truth in love, we become like Jesus in John chapter 8 when he's talking to the woman caught in adultery. He says, no one condemns you, but go and sin no more. And we should desire to have those conversations to help people who are in need, to help people who are caught, and to see how they can be free from that sin. Now, I understand that church hurt is real. And we could all go around, and we probably all have our own personal stories of someone hurting us. And unfortunately, it is real. It does exist sometimes in the church. And let me just say, I'm sorry that you had to experience hurt. That maybe someone didn't talk to you properly. I want you to see from this passage that this is not God's heart. That this is not his desire, that he wants you to come to him in love and be able to see how much better he has for you. And I can almost say with certainty that in many cases is that the heart of the person was probably healthy as well. They just probably executed it wrong. So the reality is this: we have hurt, but we can help gently restore people back to a place of unity, back to a place of health by how we come to people. That even when we come to them, they may be frustrated by us, by what we have to say, but if we come to them in the right way, they should see God's love flowing through us. That no matter what, when they walk away from the conversation, we can say, you know what, I may not agree with them, I may not like what they have to say, but I do know that they love me, that they're concerned for me, that they care for me, and I need to think about what that means. I also know that not everyone is in a place where they want to hear confrontational news. They want to be lovingly rebuked. I mean, we have kind of these, we put Western and American values into the church where we feel like independence is the key value here. Again, you go your own way, I do my own thing. I live in this pew, you live in this pew, and none shall we ever meet. But Paul is saying we are not independent, we are interdependent. That we are a body, and that when one part of the body is unhealthy, that we need to come and help fix it so that the entire body can be healthy. See, we don't just come to gently restore the person, we come because we want to take care of the entire body as well. Let's look at how we can carry each other's burdens, verse 2 of chapter 6. He says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone and not in his neighbor. For each will have to bear his own load. Well, Paul now talks about that another way that we can show love to one another is not just restoring someone from sin, but helping those who are burdened. This word burden is to carry something extremely heavy. And we've all been in a place where we're carrying something extremely heavy. And if we try to carry it for too long, we can get crushed by its weight. But the burdens in life come in all different shapes and sizes, and they're often unavoidable. None of us choose to want to carry a burden. None of us choose that, hey, I'll take a burden today. We don't choose it, but yet somehow it comes. It finds us. We all have burdens. They may come in the form of a mental illness or physical suffering, financial crisis, family crises. They all come in different forms and shapes, and Paul assumes that we all have them because we all do. And therefore, because we all have them, is that we shouldn't look down on people because they have this burden, because we have a burden ourselves. And we shouldn't try to carry them alone. That we should all be trying to help each other with their burden. At that time in the church is that there was this level of this idea of spirituality that if I can act like I'm spiritual, meaning I don't have any burdens, that I don't have any problems, then people will think that I have it all together. And that people will look at me as some great spiritual guy. And the reality is, if we want to be honest with ourselves, is that not much has changed over 2,000 years, has it? Because we all tend to walk around trying to kind of minimize our burdens. Throughout our churches in the United States and throughout the world is that we are constantly hearing when someone asks us, how are you doing this week? We tend to sum it up with one word, don't we? Good, right? Our dog could have just died. We could have lost our job. Our car broke down, an expensive repair. Like all three of them could have happened all at once, and we still say, good. Because either we feel like they don't really care about us, or that if we fear if that we share too much about our life is that they will think down on us. And so Paul is saying here, listen, this attitude where we try to hide our burdens is not bravery, and it's not spirituality, it's pride. It's pride. Because we sit there saying, I think I can do it myself, that I don't need the gift that God has given us in people, that I can figure this all out all on my own. And Paul's saying, no, you have to remember, we all have burdens. Even the great spiritual leaders, the heroes of the faith in the Bible, they were not self-sufficient. Moses, one of the greatest leaders of all of Israel, could not bear the load of his leadership by himself. That when they're in the wilderness, that Moses is overseeing and judging and trying to provide counsel and mediate conflicts, and he's trying to do all of these things, and his father-in-law comes and says, what you're doing is not good. This is not sustainable, that you won't be able to carry this burden by yourself. And so Jethro works with him to devise a plan to invite the spiritual elders of Israel to come and help carry this burden and help be judges over tens and hundreds of people. So Moses didn't have to do it by himself. Paul was no stranger to burdens either. He was constantly being weary and afflicted. In 2 Corinthians 7:6, he says, but God who comforts the downcast comforted us by the coming of Titus. I like how John Stott says this. He says, God's comfort was not given to Paul through his private prayer and waiting upon the Lord, but through the companionship of a friend and through the good news which he brought. Human friendship in which we bear one another's burden is part of the purpose of God for all his people. So we should not keep our burdens to ourselves, but rather seek a Christian friend who will help to bear them with us. See, one of God's greatest gifts that he gives us is each other. It's the church. And anytime that we say that I want to carry this burden by myself, we are rejecting his gift. We're saying, no, thank you. I don't need it. And that's pride. Paul is using the imperative form of carry each other's burdens. And so he's saying this is not a suggestion. This is not a suggestion in which we say, well, I have some extra time today, so I'll help someone. Or I can see that maybe they need it, they deserve it. Or, I feel like doing this today. And so therefore, we kind of lean in. No, the imperative form is a command that we are to carry each other's burdens at all time. See, this command is similar to what Jesus writes in John 15:12, where he says, a new commandment I give to you, to love one another as I have loved you. So again, Paul is saying, if you want to walk with the Spirit, if you want to follow the law, then you will love one another by carrying each other's burdens. See, this is what it means to be the church. This is the mark of a church, of loving each other and carrying each other's burdens. Now, if we look at verse 5 again, it says something that seems to contradict everything that Paul just said. He says, for each will have to bear his own load. So we sit there and say, well, what is it, Paul? Are we handing our burdens? Are we helping? Are we asking for help? Or are we carrying our own loads? Like, what is it? Tell me what's going on. Well, Paul said there's two different words here, right? Burden is something extremely heavy that we can't lift by ourselves, and a load is a weight that's kind of designed for like a personal backpack. I know in this church that we have a group of people that loves to go hiking. And so, if we can take in this analogy, is that when we get ready to go hiking, we fill our backpack with the essentials and then the necessary things that we need so that we can go hiking. We don't fill it up more than what we can carry. It would be rude. We are responsible to carry our own stuff. See, the load is that we should carry our own responsibilities. No one else should be a father to my kids. No one else should be providing for my family. No one else, right? Sometimes we might need a little bit of help, but no, I don't give my responsibilities away. I don't allow other people to take the responsibilities that God has given me to do it. So we have to be careful about that. Paul knows that there will always be people who will try to take advantage of someone's goodwill. We know these people. These people are always asking for help, aren't they? That every time you talk to them, they're always in an emergency. They're always in a crisis. They're going from one crisis to the next, one problem to the next. That they're always willing to allow you to do more and them to do a little bit less. But Paul is saying, listen, don't make your burdens loads, and don't make your loads burdens. Help carry each other's burdens, but be responsible for your own load. Now, sometimes we got to figure out, is this a burden or is this a load? And we have to pray through that. We have to pray and allow the Holy Spirit to help us discern what that means, okay? Maybe we ask people around us, but we have to be responsible. Help carry each other's burdens, but be responsible for our own loads. Now, to help someone carry their burdens, we have to come in close proximity with them. We've probably all been asked to help move a house, move something. Usually we're asked to help move a washer and dryer that's on the very top, 4th floor of a house around the spiral staircase and all that kind of stuff. Or this bed that you need 10 people to move over. If you ever want to test your marriage, just you and your wife kind of lift a king-size headboard up around a staircase. That one almost got us to the brink. But you invite friends over, help carry this load. Keep my marriage healthy, please. So you're trying to, you're trying to carry, but to help, when you come over to help someone carry, you have to be in close proximity. I can't help someone carry a couch from afar. Hey, I'll help you. You just start without me. Right? We got to come close. We got to get shoulder to shoulder. You're almost like together as we pick up the load to distribute the weight as much as we possibly can. And Paul's saying, listen, as the family, we got to come close. We got to come close. We got to know each other. We got to know each other's names. We got to listen and understand each other's stories. We need to listen so that we can invest in each other's lives. That if we want to help each other, we got to know each other and be in community with each other. See, I believe that community is not done well in rows looking at one person. Community is done best when we form circles. Community is not done well when one person is just speaking all the time. Community is done better when we are in discussions, having conversations, sharing thoughts, and celebrating what God is doing in our life. See, community is not done as well as when we're just saying, I'll pray for you. Community is done better when we say, let me put this love into action and let me help you out. See, we believe in community here at Westwood, and we desire for everyone to be in community so that you can be known and that they can know you. And so if you're not in a community, I would encourage you to find one. We have them that meet on the evenings. We have them that meet on Sunday mornings. We have them that meet all throughout the week. We have over 20 plus community groups that are available. This fall, we're going to do a big launch, a big push for more community groups. So I want you to start praying about that now as we do kind of this all church, all into community as we move forward. Because for us to not be in community is to reject a gift that God has given us. And we shouldn't want to do that. Let's look at how we can sow a harvest of holiness. Verse 7. It says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption. But the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. Well, Paul is now using an agricultural analogy to basically say is that what you sow is what you reap. Now, this makes sense to us. I mean, this is a farming analogy. Agriculture, every farmer knows this. If you plant seeds of corn, you're not going to get barley or something else. Same thing is with our spirituality, with our moral character, is that when we sow good things, we will reap good things. When we sow bad things, we will reap bad things. And so we have to be very careful about the things that we are sowing in our life, in our heart, in our minds. We have to be careful about the friends that we have around us. That even though we may enjoy them, even though they may be funny and we think that they're harmless, when they will continue to sow seeds of different values than us, than godly values. Eventually, over time, as those seeds will start to grow and they'll start to germinate and we will start to reap what they're sowing. So we have to be careful. We have to be careful about the things that we put in our thoughts and the things that we're allowing to be put into our mind, because eventually we will have those. We'll start believing those lies of Satan. We'll start believing what he's telling us. We will start living in doubt and fear. We have to be careful about the movies and the entertainment that we're watching. We'll start longing for those things, lusting for those things. We'll start dreaming about those things as we are putting them into our minds and our hearts. Again, this seems like a very obvious value or very obvious lesson, principle that we should know. But I think that there are Christians throughout our world who are continuing to sow and gratify the desires of the flesh, and they wonder why they're not reaping holiness or victory or blessing. They're wondering why, as we want to live our own life, they don't feel close to God. That, again, we sow greed, and we wonder why we're not reaping joy. We go after and pursue power, and we wonder why we don't have peace. We go after lust, but we hope for love. But Paul is saying, listen, sin will always reap destruction, never life. Holiness is a harvest, and whether we reap it or not will depend on what we sow. So we need to sow holiness. We need to walk in the way of the Spirit so that we reap holiness. See, when we sow holiness, we help the community. Paul says it's the spiritual that should help people and gently restore them to sin. It's the spiritual. It's the people who are walking in the Spirit. And so if we're not walking in the Spirit, if we're not living in holy lives, then we can't help them. It's those who want to obey the law, to love your neighbor, are the ones who are going to carry each other's burdens. So therefore, if we are sowing good things, we are going to show good things. So if we are not sowing the Spirit and the new nature that he's giving us, then we are not going to be in a place where we are going to help others, and it's going to hinder the church. Now, Paul understands that sometimes we can get discouraged by doing good things. Is that we do a couple good things, and we want a couple good things back to keep encouraging, but sometimes that doesn't always happen. Sometimes we do 10 good things, 100 good things, and we wonder, why aren't we getting good things back? We show kindness, and yet maybe we don't receive kindness back. We try to do other things, and we don't see it come back. We pray for an unbeliever, and we don't see repentance. We want to walk in faith, but maybe we don't see in deliverance. And God is in there saying, listen, just wait. Just like the principle of farming is that you sow a seed, you won't reap a harvest the very next day. There are times where you may have to wait weeks, months, years before you see how God is working. Sometimes an inexperienced farmer will give up on the crop too soon. We see that the seeds aren't germinating the way that they're not growing the way that we want them. And so we give up, we stop watering, and we start moving on to a different crop. And we stunt the health of the seed. And Paul says, don't give up from doing good. You don't want to stunt the growth of the church. You don't want to stunt the growth of what God is doing, what the Spirit is working. You don't want to stunt it. That there will be a harvest. It may just take a little more time than what we want, but there will be. So keep going good. Keep pouring out. Keep showing the Spirit into people's lives. He ends with this final verse. He says, therefore, as we have opportunity, we must work for the good of all, especially for those who belong to the household of faith. See, Paul kind of sums up our Christian life in this one verse. That the church should not be known for its great worship service, though we want those, but that's not what the church should even be known for. The church should not be known for its extravagant buildings or its fantastic programs, even though we want to have good programs and we want to have capable buildings. He says more than anything else, the church should be known for doing good to others. When our community talks about Westwood, what does it say? See, I know that for 35 years plus, is that we're known for Summer Hummer. We're known for the building on this corner. We're known for, these things that people will say that, that they maybe have experienced. But more than anything else, we want them to say, that is the church that does good. See, I believe that's why God is leading us as elders and as a staff to reach the practical needs of our community. That we don't want to be just a church that is defined by 1 hour every week. That we want to go out into the community and do good. So we have launched kind of a subgroup to go and to work with local partners and to see what God is doing out there, to see how we can tangibly bring us along and to say, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. As a collective body, obviously, we want to do good individually as much as we possibly can. But this is just our way of how we're going to love God, love people, and make disciples here at Westwood. So Paul says this, as the church, we need to love one another. And how we love one another is by gently restoring people in sin, by carrying each other's burdens, and by sowing a harvest of holiness. I want us to do that today. The first Sunday of every month is that we like to take communion. And communion is a family meal. That everyone who takes communion is identifying that they are of the household of faith, that they have put their life into Jesus, that they believe in what he has done on the cross for them. So if that is not you, if you are still kind of kicking the tires of faith, that you're still not sure who Jesus is to you, I would just ask you for the plate to just pass by. No one's going to judge you. We don't want you to do something that your heart is not fully in. However, this is a great opportunity for us to reflect. For us in this moment to examine our own hearts and examine our own lives, to start to wonder, what is keeping me from doing good? What is keeping me from representing Jesus by how I show love for others? What is keeping me from being an example of Christ to our community? And as you take a piece of bread and juice, hold on to that, and we'll take them together in just a few minutes.